Good morning. It is Friday, August 5th. You're listening to the College Football Daily. I'm your host, Lance Glynn. I hope everyone has enjoyed their week. And on today's episode, I am happy to be joined by Cory Smith of PackPride.com, covering NC State for 24/7 Sports. Cory, how we doing? Thanks so much for coming on and joining me.
I'm doing wonderful, man. I appreciate you having me on as always.
So, Cory, the Wolfpack, they're in quite the position right this year heading into the season. NC State among the favorites to compete for an ACC title this year. And with Devin Leary likely going to the NFL after, the window is sort of now for the Wolfpack, right? I think looking at the schedule, they have a legitimate chance to win 10 games for the first time, I think, since the early 2000s. So out of the gate, just tell me what the vibe is like in Raleigh as fall camp gets underway. You know, how much anticipation is there going into the season? And how much excitement really surrounds the program entering 2022?
Yeah, I mean, I think you head into this season knowing that this is probably the best chance that Dave Doeren has had to really compete for an ACC championship game. You think back to the 2017 and 2018 teams. 2017 it was the strength was really the defense. You had that front line that are all in the NFL now, all still on NFL rosters. Bradley Chubb, Justin Jones, BJ Hill, and then Kentavious Street, all those guys. And you're like, man, that defense is really, really good. The offense was kind of catching up. You had a Ryan Finley, Kelvin Harmon, a couple guys, but the offense wasn't really there. They won 9 games. The next year they won 9 games again, but it was because the defense wasn't quite up to the task. The thing that you have about this NC State team coming into this year is you have all of the pieces when it comes to the offense. You obviously, as you said, Devin Leary. You have several guys around him, 3 of the top 4 receivers returning from last year, 4 of the 5 starting offensive linemen from last year, including several guys that got starting experience along the offensive line last year too. And then that defense is just ridiculous. 10 of 11 guys that were on the starting depth chart from last year, all coming back. And, several of those guys being all ACC players. And then you have a lot of the guys, like you think about, the Peyton Wilson, Isaiah Moore, Cyrus Fagan was a guy that came in last year with a lot of expectations. All those guys were lost by midseason, and NC State still had a top 3 defense in nearly every metric when it comes to the ACC last year. So you get all those guys back and all the depth pieces that were behind them all back this upcoming season, and it makes for building up to probably the most hype season we've ever seen for Dave Doeren's tenure at NC State.
So let's look at the team now, and we'll start with the offense. And this team, while Devin Leary is great, the running game last year, not so much, right? 13 out of 14 in the ACC in rushing yards per game, second to last in attempts, to which I kind of get, right? When you have a quarterback like Leary, I understand that you want the ball in his hands more than really anyone else. But I mean, that running game, it has to get better, right? And look, they're losing Ike Ekwonu as well, which obviously affects the offensive line. But you mentioned 4 of the 5 starters are back besides him, obviously. So are the resources there for that running game to get better, or will it once again, for the most part, all be kind of on Leary?
Yeah, I mean, I think the running game has a chance to actually get better, which seems surprising given the fact that you lose Zonovan Knight and Ricky Person Jr. from last year. They both go on to the NFL. They're trying to make it, at the NFL level. But you look at the offensive line, as you mentioned, you do lose Ike Ekwonu, but one kind of underrated part of the running game falling off last year, I felt like, was losing Chandler Zavala. They lost him right before the Boston College game, and that the running game was good, not great against Clemson, but that was really the only ACC test they had to that point. They played extremely well up to that point, and the running game was probably the most impressive part for the first 2 games for NC State. And then, the passing game came around. Well, you lose Chandler Zavala, and you suddenly lose the left side of that offensive line with him playing the left guard position for NC State last year. So you get him back. He cleared NCAA, did grant his waiver after initially denying it. They granted it. He's coming back. So that feels like a really kind of underrated part of the potential success for NC State going into this year. But you do have guys like Jordan Houston that came back. He didn't play really last year, a very limited amount of snaps last year, but he played a lot during his freshman season in 2019 before Ricky Person Jr. was healthy the last 2 years, so he got those seconds. Was the second back in that rotation. They bring in a 4-star running back in Michael Allen, that, they feel really good about as a potential guy to be, second or third in that rotation. I think he'll be third in that rotation to a guy named Demi Sumo Karngbe that comes from New Jersey, was, overlooked a little bit in his class. Somebody that I think a lot of people have kind of built up now. And, we've heard a ton about ever since he came into camp last year about his potential, what he could do in the future. And you really feel like if he's able to put it all together this upcoming season, those are two kind of all-around backs with him and Jordan Houston. And Michael Allen played wide receiver even at Greenville Rose last year. If those guys are able to find that combination together, I think this running game could really take off and be potentially even better than what they had last year.
Yeah, and if that running game could just improve slightly, I mean, I'm sure that would do wonders for what is already a really good offense. And in regards to Leary, he took a huge leap last season, 35 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. I got to support him, my fellow Jersey guy, although he's from South Jersey, I'm more Central Jersey. But with Leary, and this is going to be hard to do, but can he get even better, right? Can they open up the offense even more so that he adds, I guess, a couple more touchdowns or there's a couple more yards? And maybe that has to do with an improved running game. Maybe that improved running game helps him, take even another step. But, is it possible to even be better than he was in 2021? It's going to be pretty hard to do.
Yeah, I've said this a few times, actually. If you go back and look at those first 2 games where he was kind of shaking off the rust, I think people forget that Devin Leary was coming off of a very, very serious leg injury. He was lost he only played 3 games in the 2020 season and was lost for the rest of the season. Bailey Hockman came in and played in his place. He now comes back for NC State this upcoming year. And, he only played those first 2 games. He only threw for 3 touchdowns total. He went on the rest of the year and threw for 3 touchdowns. I believe 3 touchdowns or more in 7 of the last 10 games. Threw for 4 touchdowns in multiple games. Broke the single season record for NC State that was previously held by Phillip Rivers. I think some people might know that name. But when you look at what he's capable of doing, I think, the stats could get significantly better because there is a known commodity coming into this year. It's not all right, how is he gonna look? What is he gonna do coming into this year? It's, hey, how can we help him have more success than he did last year? How can we make Devin Carter a downfield threat, which I think he showed capability of last year? They've moved Thayer Thomas, one of the more reliable receivers in NC State history. They moved him over to the outside receiver position. Porter Rooks, a former 4-star receiver, slides in at the slot receiver position this year. They've got more speed with Anthony Smith and Julian Gray are 2 guys to look out for this upcoming year that can bring that kind of speed role to NC State too. So you've got all these pieces around him. I do think there's a chance for him to have more success. There's not an Emeka Mezi on this roster, which was, all-time leading receptions guy, leading receiver in NC State history. Broke Jalen Samuels' record previously held by Torrey Holt. So all of those numbers are huge for him. But he moves on, and now they have all these pieces still around him. And I don't want people to forget about the tight end positions too, because you've got guys like Trent Penix, you've got guys like Chris Tootle that can be really productive in the red zone, and also, Trent Penix being that H-back guy that I think can play a big role this upcoming season. So yes, they're going to open up the playbook even more for him, and I don't think they're going to try this whole, hey, let's force the run. Let's force the run. They're probably, all 3 of those guys, like I said, all 3 of those running backs that they have in that potential rotation are all, all-purpose back kind of guys too that could play that role and be receivers out of the backfield. So I think there's multiple opportunities for him to get better, and it's because of the opening up of this offense, and it's also because of him being a known commodity coming into this year.
Joined by Cory Smith of PackPride.com, covering NC State for 24/7 Sports. So, Cory, the Wolfpack defensively, top 25 in total defense last season, a really strong unit for Dave Doeren. But on the defensive line, they lose Daniel Joseph, who went to the NFL. So definitely a blow to that unit. But really, other than that, they bring a lot back. So with that being said, what's the expectation for the defensive line specifically? Should we, I guess, expect a step back, maybe similar results to last year, or could they even possibly take a step forward with those on the roster returning this year?
Yeah, I know this sounds weird to say, but I do think they can take a step forward on the defensive line. A big reason for that is the return of Cory Durden. He was, obviously all ACC last year. You also saw last year at the end of the year, the defensive line while I think a lot of people probably would have thought they would have taken a big step back with the loss of Savion Jackson, a guy like Davin Van stepped in there and was a really productive part of that defensive line for NC State. And he's been a guy that we've heard for years coming to before he even came to NC State. He was a former wrestler. He's just a freak athlete, one of those kinds of guys that can put on a ton of weight and still have all the speed. So if you're looking for a guy that can kind of fill in that role that Daniel Joseph really had as a pass rusher for NC State, that's going to be the guy right there is Davin Van. But Savion Jackson has added some more good weight this offseason. He's now up a little bit over 300 pounds, but in a three down lineman set, he's going to be a guy that can be really productive for NC State. And like I said, Cory Durden across the middle, all ACC last year. The expectation is for him to still be a really versatile piece for this team too. He could slide to the outside if a guy like Joshua Harris, who is cut down, last we heard was between 30 to 40 pounds this offseason, went from a guy that was, a little over 350 pounds down to a little bit better, more healthy weight, but still has all the power across the middle for NC State in Joshua Harris. So if Cory Durden slides to the outside, Joshua Harris comes inside, you've still got three really big defensive linemen. And somebody that I don't want people to forget about too, CJ Clark was the starter going into last year. He earned the starting role over Cory Durden heading into the last season. And over Joshua Harris as well heading into last season. He's still a guy that could be, when he's healthy, the starting defensive tackle for NC State. So I think he's probably going to be, a little bit more of a depth piece coming into this year. A big reason why he did have the injury last year, and it was pretty early on in the season, but still something you're recovering from with it being a knee injury. So I think once he's kind of a bigger part of this rotation, you've got 6-7 guys that you feel really good about. So while you lose a pass rusher in Daniel Joseph, there's so many guys that are talented and eager to step up. And I feel like those guys are going to be really big parts of why not only the defensive line has success, but those linebackers behind them do too.
So, Cory, a couple more for me. As I mentioned earlier, look, NC State, they're looking for their first double-digit win season since 2002. I think it would be the only the second time all-time for the program, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And of course, they're among the favorites to win the ACC title, or at least get to the ACC title game. But how much pressure do you think is on the program with these raised expectations, right? Like if they go hypothetically 9-3, they win a bowl game, so they get to those 10 wins, but they don't make the ACC title game. Is that enough? Or is there kind of an ACC title game or bust mentality, right, from the fan base?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the question all offseason is how do they deal with these expectations? Because, obviously the players, the coaches, they're all talking the talk, and we're ready to see if they can walk the walk because, they've talked about, hey, we're not worried about these expectations. We know what we're capable of. We're putting in the work, and obviously they are because we've seen, we saw the spring game. We saw several guys that were, younger players that have stepped up. Like I said, Anthony Smith earlier, he was a guy that really stepped up in that game. So you get the feeling that, yes, the work has been put in. You get the feeling the confidence is there with these guys. But, yeah, you got to go into ECU week 1.
Yeah.
It's at Greenville. We've seen, teams from around the area struggle when those
talk about a tough opening game, right? Talk about a tough opening
exactly.
game.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's always been a tough game. I mean, NC State has lost the last 2 games at ECU. Obviously, those games date back to, the last one was right before 2 games ago was with Russell Wilson. The last one was, Ryan Finley's, I believe, freshman year, if I remember correctly. So, it's been a little while since those have taken place, but it's still a very difficult place to play at. It's, ECU is a team that really gets up for that one. So, it's going to start week 1. And I mean, I think when you go back to, you said the, ACC championship or bust mentality for NC State fans, there's some NC State fans that are going into that every single year. This program is really crying out for, wanting that type of success, whether it's basketball, whether it's baseball, whether it's football, but football being the biggest one, obviously, because, it is that moneymaker, and it is the, what's kind of the lifeblood of college athletics right now too. So, NC State fans really want to see this happen. And I don't know that I would say it's ACC championship or bust because Clemson is still there. But the fan base really wants to see exactly what you talked about earlier. Double-digit wins for this program, something that's only been done one other time in program history. Dave Doran has knocked on that door multiple times. One time losing a bowl that would have gotten them to 10 wins. One time, obviously last year, not being able to play a bowl game against UCLA because of COVID factors with UCLA 4 hours before kickoff. So this is definitely a mark that NC State fans want to see. If it happens in the regular season, you feel pretty good about your chances to get to the ACC championship game, but you have to do it with a win against Clemson, which is obviously, as we've seen, they've won 30-plus games at home over the last several years in a row. So this is a very difficult task for NC State as well.
And so last one for me, Cory, I want to quickly touch on realignment. Now, look, obviously the ACC has stood pat so far. They haven't made any moves like the Big Ten did and like the SEC did a year ago, but there have been rumors thrown around. There have been hypotheticals thrown around involving schools like UNC, Clemson, Miami, Florida State, and others. And look, if those schools were to make a move, obviously the grant of rights is a big factor in all of that happening. But if hypothetically those schools were to make a move, that would really change things, I think, in the ACC and would force other programs in that conference to really start thinking. What do you know about, I guess, just NC State's stance regarding realignment? Any preparations they're making behind the scenes in case, I guess, various scenarios end up happening? Where do the Wolfpack kind of stand, and what's really been the biggest topic of conversation this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, NC State is keeping things pretty close to the chest, pretty close to the vest right now. But everything that we've heard, for NC State when it comes to that is, it's going to have to be something that is either tied to, a program like a UNC. I think if you have those two kind of coming together, it could end up leading to both of them going to the same conference. But and there's also that hypothetical. If UNC goes to the Big Ten, would NC State be a team that wants to be looked at by the SEC? Would they want to go to the SEC? And I think there are those kind of discussions that I'm sure are going on behind the scenes. Again, like I said, NC State's not really showing their cards too much. But when it comes to realignment, I think the biggest thing for NC State right now to focus on, because it seems like things are kind of dying off, at least right now, heading into the season. But this is just a huge season for NC State as a whole, because not only does the football program have a chance to, finish the season ranked for a second straight year, have a chance to get to a really strong bowl game, or, potentially win an ACC championship game and see where things lead them from there. But, the program as a whole too, you're talking about, the basketball program trying to rejuvenate things after, a down season last year and on the men's side, the women's side trying to get back to the, another ACC championship and trying to get to, the NCAA tournament and make another long run. But the program as a whole has finished, multiple times top 25 in Directors Cup the last 2 years. So they need to see, strength across the entire, university again. And I think that makes them attractive to, an SEC or a Big Ten, or, if things hold still for the ACC, and if there's another third super conference that starts kind of building there, I think NC State feels like they're in a pretty good position in that sense because of the recent success of the program. The brand isn't there on par with a UNC or, some other schools that have been mentioned in all of this, but the recent success for NC State is what really helps them, I think, in all of this when it comes to looking at conference realignment.
You can follow him on Twitter at @CorySmith and make sure to check out PackPride.com. Remember to give us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, and check out and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. For Cory Smith, I am Lance Glynn. Thanks for listening to the College Football Daily, and enjoy your weekend, everybody.